So, as is often the case for my TBR, I give myself a list of books to read that is way too long for me to actually get through during the month. But that hasn't stopped me so far, so here is my rather lengthy TBR, and I thought that I would share it with you. And the order that I'm actually going to go through this list, it's going to be from the book that I want to read most in the month of May to the book that I want to read the least in the month of May. Now, don't get me wrong, I really want to read all of these. In fact, there are actually some books that are not on my TBR for May that I want to read even more, but I sort of want to put them off a little bit, maybe for a few months for whatever reasons. This was probably a rather unnecessary introduction, so let's just jump right in. And we are starting off with Realm Breaker. And this is written by the same author who wrote the Red Queen series. I'm not sure if that means anything to you. I haven't read the Red Queen series, or anything else by this author for that matter, but I've heard a lot of good things, and I have been planning to get to the Red Queen series, but I don't know, it's almost kind of better to start here, because this is her newest book, so it is probably going to have better writing, and it actually comes out on May 4th. So apparently this book is about saving the world from a terrible enemy and a terrible darkness, and the main character is the last of an ancient lineage, and for whatever reason she is the one who can save the world. So far, seems like a lot of the fantasy books we see nowadays, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be bad. Anyways, she's going to be joined by a bunch of people, or creatures, who are going to assist her in her quest. And apparently that list is a squire forced to choose between home and honor, an immortal avenging a broken promise, an assassin exiled and bloodthirsty, an ancient sorceress whose riddles hide an eerie foresight, a forger with a secret past, a bounty hunter with a score to settle. Honestly, this description doesn't sound all that exciting to me, but because I've heard such good things about the author in general, I want to give it a shot. And this is the book I'm going to start with. Number 2 is volume 4 of Heartstopper, and this is a little weird because I actually haven't read volumes 1 to 3, but I'm definitely going to be reading them. Okay, let me rephrase, not definitely, I'm really hoping to read them before the end of April, so I'm hoping to get to volume 4 in May, and I've heard, again, so many great things about this series, so I really want to read it. Plus, I really want to get more into graphic novels because I don't really read much of those, and I think that this is going to be a good place to sort of jump in. And the general summary is boy meets boy, boys become friends, boys fall in love. So basically it's an LGBTQ romance, graphic novel series, and it sounds really cool and interesting, and I know people say that it's just adorable and makes you feel really happy inside, and that's definitely something that, and that's definitely something that I need more of in my life. Oh, by the way, volume 4 is actually out on May 13th. Number 3, we have Blade of Secrets, and this is actually going to be the first book in a new series by an author that I have also never read anything from before, but have heard great things about. So I decided to jump into her works with this new novel. So this is coming out on May 4th, and I'm just going to read this to you because this actually really makes me interested in the book. So this is a fantasy novel, and the sort of little blurb says, a teenage blacksmith with social anxiety accepts a commission from the wrong person and is forced to go on the run to protect the world from the most powerful magical sword she's ever made. And I don't know, that just sounds really fun. You don't really get to read about many characters with social anxiety, especially in fantasy novels. So this already caught my attention, and I definitely want to read this book. The next book is In the Ravenous Dark. And this is another book that I haven't really heard much about, except that it popped up on some people's most anticipated releases lists. The author hasn't written much so far, and I'm not really interested in the other book the author has written, but this one sounds really interesting. So let me just read you a little blurb. A pansexual blood mage reluctantly teams up with an... Let's just wait for the plane to pass. So, a pansexual blood mage reluctantly teams up with an undead spirit to start a rebellion among the living and the dead. And that actually sounds really interesting, a little bit unique, and it definitely caught my attention. And I read a little bit more, so from what I gather, in this world, people are paired people who have magical abilities are paired with undead spirits, and those spirits sort of protect them, but also control them, which is not that great. And their main character is saddled/gifted with such a spirit. And apparently there's also going to be a love triangle between our main character, a female sorceress who is described as beguiling, not much else, and her guardian/controller spirit. So, not sure how I feel about that one, but we'll see. It's definitely worth a shot. Next up, I have The Lights of Prague. And this is another one that I didn't know too much about until I saw it on someone's list of most anticipated releases for the year. And honestly, the first thing that caught my attention was the cover. I know, don't judge a book by its cover, but sometimes I do. And this is one of those times. And the little blurb also says that this is for fans of V.E. Schwab and The Witcher. And I honestly haven't read V.E. Schwab yet. Oh my god. I know, this is terrible. I'm sure I'm going to love her work. Okay, I'm 90% sure that I'm going to love her book, because her writing just sounds like it would be really up my alley. And I haven't read The Witcher either, but I've heard great things and I love the show, so this blurb definitely made me want to read the book. From what I gather, in this world there are monsters that hunt human beings, but there is also a group of people who hunt these monsters, and our main character is one of them. The creatures that we will encounter in this book include vampires, ghosts, and a will-o'-the-wisp, which is rather unusual, so that is also a cool little element that I'm looking forward to. Number 6 is These Feathered Flames, and this is apparently also the start of a new series by a debut author, and I don't read enough of those, so I decided to give this one a shot, especially since it sounds like it's going to be really interesting, and it intrigued me. So, basically, this is a queer retelling of the Firebird, and I really enjoy that myth. So apparently this book is about two twins, and one twin remains to be trained in the palace, and another twin is taken to train with her aunt, who is the Firebird. But then something happens, the queen dies, and these two twin girls are kind of thrust into a dangerous world, and they are trying to figure out who killed their mother. Number 7 is Witches Steeped in Gold, which is another novel by a debut author. So again, something that I want to read more of, because I think that it's really good for authors to get that initial push with their first book, and I want to help, especially if the book sounds intriguing. So the blurb says something along the lines of there are two enemy witches who need to enter into an alliance to take down a common enemy. And I don't read a lot of books about witches, nor do I read many books that are Jamaican inspired, so these elements kind of really intrigue me and make me want to read this book. Next up, I have books 3, 4, and 4.5, which I understand is sort of a novella-length novel from the Raven Cycle. And I actually read the first two books a really long time ago, and I really loved the first book in particular, not so much the second one, but I'm not gonna hold that against the series. And I've been planning to read them for ages. And the reason I want to get to them sooner rather than later is because another book set in the same world is coming out very soon, on May 18th in fact. And I want to read all the previous books in case there are spoilers for that one, which I also want to read. By the way, the book that's coming out is called Mr. Impossible, and it is also on my reading list, just lower, and it is the second book in a trilogy. And the first book in that trilogy is also on my TBR for the month of May. Honestly, I have no idea if I'm going to get through all of these. This is kind of a lot of books to read in the same world for me. I tend not to do that because they kind of start to bore me after a little while, and it's not the fault of the book, it's just that I like to jump between many different worlds, so it's kind of very hard for me to just binge read the same series. Anyways, I can tell you a little bit about the Raven Cycle because I have read the first two books. Basically, there is this group of kids who are looking for a Raven King who is buried somewhere in their town. And whoever finds him gets a wish granted. And they're all looking for him for their own various reasons. And of course, other people are looking for him too because, well, who wouldn't want to get their wishes granted? And some of these people are willing to kill, some of these people are definitely dangerous. And we also discover that some of these kids have certain special abilities, which kind of make things interesting. So, from what I understand, the Raven Cycle deals with this quest to find the king. I don't want to read the description for the Dreamer Trilogy because I know it takes place in the same world and I don't really want to spoil myself. So, I have books on my TBR that I know nothing about, except what world they're set in. And we're actually almost at the end of my TBR. So, number 13 is The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks. And this is the third book in a trilogy, the third and final book that is. And this actually came out in April. But I didn't get around to reading it, and I am not going to until the end of the month, I know that for sure. And this was actually on my April TBR, but it's going to sort of slide into my May TBR now. So I read the first book a while ago, and I definitely enjoyed it. It was kind of humorous, definitely fun. It wasn't a 5-star read, but it was fun, so I do recommend it for those purposes. It had a few gothic elements, and it was generally a quick read. I also read the second book, and I didn't like that one at all. So I don't recommend that one. And now we have the third book and I'm willing to give it a shot, so we will see how that goes. But because I didn't like the second book, it's not very high on my priority list. And last but not least, we have Blood Heir by Ilona Andrews. So this is a book set in the Kate Daniels world, if you've read anything by those authors. And that's sort of like an urban fantasy, darker series with a main character who is quite a badass. And in a version of our world that is quite interesting. So basically in that world, things sort of cycle between magic and technology, and that happens over many thousands of years, but when magic is on the rise, then technology starts working. So anything built by people using technology kind of collapses, like buildings, planes, things like that. And when technology is on the rise, then magic kind of disappears and fades away, and we don't really get any magical creatures. So the series, and well, I assume this new series as well, is set in sort of modern times, where magic is on the rise again. So technology is starting to fall apart, and we're starting to get a lot of dangerous creatures. So anything from rather disturbing versions of vampires to terrible, vengeful gods that are not really that nice. At some point we even had undead mermaids, so that was very interesting. And Blood Heir is another book set in the same world, and since I loved the previously mentioned Kate Daniels series so much, I'm actually really looking forward to reading this. The only thing is, it came out quite a while ago at this point, so my excitement has kind of died down a little bit. I'm still really looking forward to it, but I'm kind of more excited about all of the new releases I mentioned, which is why this is closer to the bottom of my list. Even though I am fully expecting to love it, but it's not an urgent read, I suppose, if that makes sense. I don't know, let me know if you do that too, and if you're more excited about new releases and kind of let older books move to the bottom of your TBR. So, this is pretty much the end of the video. I've gone through my entire May TBR, and I'm really curious if you actually felt intrigued by any of the books I mentioned. Let me know if any of those are on your May TBR, or any TBR for that matter. Happy reading! Bye!